sorry, just with regards to, a recap on what we've done for the Unit 5.3 People Management. So far, what we've done is we've covered Learning Outcome 1 and Learning Outcome 2. But in that, especially, we have studied, about the type of organizational structures and, what impact does it have on the culture of the organization. So we've looked at the types like functional matrix, horizontal, functional matrix, flat, divisional, 4 different types of structures. And within those structures, what kind of, behaviors do you get to see from people working within the organization? And then we looked at, the management styles, which basically kind of have an impact on, the culture of the organization. If you have an autocratic leader, we looked at some leadership styles. So you had basically, different theories on leadership. These theories of leadership that we discussed, primarily were looking at, talking about behavioral, intrinsic, and transformational, transactional leadership theories, which kind of dictate what kind of management style comes in. And when we look at autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, and persuasive, we looked at these 4 styles, which kind of, then helps shape maybe the culture of the organization. So going further, what we are looking at doing is we also briefly looked at last week in terms of what impact does the behavior, individual behavior have on the organization. So when you are under stress, when you're under pressure, how do you behave in the organization, in your job, and how does it affect, others in terms of peers and colleagues in the organization. Sometimes we feel that behavior also kind of, gets influenced by the knowledge and the skill that you have, or skills you have, and experience and background that you have, and then the attitude of the person, his personality, his body language, perception, the culture and opinion, all those things, maybe religious belief, also then influences how you interact with others within the organization or within departments. And then towards the end, what we looked at is, we looked at basically the 3 different types of management theories, which was, looking at briefly theory X and Y, the Hawthorne series or studies which was done in the Western Electrical Company. And we kind of summarized that, there is no, finally the conclusion drawn was that there is no set particular leadership style or management style which works in all situations. So depending on the organizational setup and the people working within the organizations, managers and leaders have to adopt a particular style to be able to manage effectively and delegate jobs and responsibilities and get goals accomplished. Now going further, just to understand, because this unit is all about working with people, working in teams, understanding people, their behavior, and how they work within the organization. So if we stretch this into the 3rd learning outcome, what we are looking at is basically in detail studying the factors which impact people's performance. So we know that businesses and organizations at some stage, when they reach a certain size, they create a structure. When the structure is made, the structure then also looks at having, because there's a structure, there is a leader and there are managers. And when you look at leaders and managers, because they behave and work in different ways, you have certain type of culture which develops, and that culture then leads to the creation of differences in some cases, or synergies when people work within the organization. Extending that into the learning outcome 3 is looking at what impacts the performance of people when you put them within an organization in a particular structure and in a particular type of organization exhibiting a type of culture. Is that okay?
Yeah.
That was a brief recap of what we've covered so far. So let's look at 2 or 3 things. Now, okay, there it joins. So when we look at some big questions, sometimes it is hard to differentiate between what is management and what is leadership. Sometimes you wear the hat of a leader, sometimes you wear the hat of a manager, but you have to have a clear definition or a clear idea in terms of when to step into a manager's role and when to step into a leadership role or a leader's role. And that is where we need to clearly understand, the big question from an organizational context is that what is management when we look at a particular setup, and what is leadership? So can you look at, think back and say, how do you correlate what is management within your place of work? What do you think would be, how do you classify, or what do you see when you hear the word, or what do you think when you hear a word called management, when in context of your organization where you work?
It's those that kind of take charge, authorize certain policies.
Right. Okay. And Wellington, what do you think in terms of your? Sorry, go on, Philip. Go on, complete. Sorry, cut you off. Go on.
Well, decision makers, basically. That's what management is.
So when you hear or think of the word management, what does it reflect? What does come to your mind?
Managers, well, higher management.
Higher management, okay. And Wellington, are you there? Wellington? Right. And when you think of leadership, Philip, what do you think in terms of what comes to your mind?
People that take charge of a situation or leads other staff. So if there's like a team, one of them who's probably the manager of that team will be the team leader. They would lead that team, and the team would see them as a team leader.
That's absolutely fine. I think in terms of you are pretty close, in terms of what you think of. So, for example, in my case, or if we have to define, say, for example, when we think of management, what we think of is what you said is that, you think of higher management, which is nothing but you think of people with absolute authority. People who have the authority or the power to actually make a decision. It could be, say, for example, they want to spend £1 million today, but they have the authority and the budget and the right to be able to do it. So management is nothing but, when we think of management, we are thinking of people with kind of authority, which is inherent in them because of the formal designation, as you said, higher management, people who are in the in the board or maybe in the CXO kind of chief operating officers, chief financial officer kind of positions, and they understand that they have this ability to be able to take a decision, and because of which they are able to act in that fashion, when it is called for. And when you look at leadership is nothing but the ability to be able to, kind of work towards the achievement of certain goals. So you will see people will always motivate their staff and their employees to be able to work in a particular direction or go into a particular direction to be able to achieve goals. But when we look at, understanding, say, for example, look at the definitions of, say, for example, management, we are looking at, getting work done, and this work can only be done if there are set objectives and, kind of goals and objectives set by the management. So on a daily basis, when you work in a place, for example, if you look at, say, an example of a business, which is, say, for example, you look at a business which is an accountancy business or maybe a solicitor's business, what you do get to see in that position is that people come into work, and when they come into work, they have predefined jobs or, responsibilities that they need to be able to accomplish, which kind of helps them move towards achieving the aims and objectives set, for the month or, for example, for the quarter In this case, a simple example would be a sales manager. They clearly know that they have to achieve this target in terms of sales, and that is where their goal and objective lies. So, and on the other hand, when you look at the leader, they have the ability wherein they are looking at inspiring the organization by creating a vision, or maybe have a clear say direction, which is for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and that tends to kind of move them in that direction, wherein they are able to set goals, which then can be passed on to the management for them to act on it, create smaller goals for the employees, and that is how big goals kind of become effective, because the bigger vision is to maybe increase sales, get profitability, get more market share. But for that, the frontline staff, the middle management, the senior management, the lower management has to kind of work on smaller goals to be able to do that. So in terms of when we look at the the key functions or key pillars of what are the functions of management, we look at basically 4 things. Managers look at, or people in management look at planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling things. So they are always, you will get to see that they are in a cycle which always looks at planning, always looks at organizing. The planning leads to organizing, organizing leads to coordination, coordination then leads to controlling aspects of work which has been given, so that they can maintain delivery and maintain the course of achieving a particular goal and objective. So let's look at an example of management here. I know last session we took an example of the iPhone. Say, for example, the new iPhone has come out. Now, what is the function of the top management in Apple? The function of top management is Apple could be 3-4 things. One is they look at, or they were obviously been working on this pipeline of creating the new iPhone, and that required a lot of planning. So they must have been planning for 2 years, 3 years, maybe more. And that planning meant that they have, the key people in the management have set some targets, and that those targets basically meant that they were looking at launching this maybe in a couple of years' time. Now those targets are then organized into smaller tasks. So that would mean that they would have teams which would be working. In terms of the work would have been divided, that okay, the new software has to be released, a new form factor has to be released, and because of which they would have had several teams working on those, on those media goals, and that would have meant that they need to organize themselves in terms of making sure everything is available on the day of the launch, or in the month in which they are looking at launching as a complete package. So, for example, the software should be ready, the handset should be ready, the softwares in terms of third-party providers for building applications, games should also be ready, and things like that. Now, the management does a key bit in terms of once the goals and objectives are given out, they look at getting into a position wherein they review. And review is nothing but a commanding, you can say that it's one of the activities commanding is basically review. Review means they will look at doing periodic checks to ensure that the progress of that goal and objective is being met. And if they feel that they are not getting their, obviously they feel that the progress is lacking, or there is something which is hindering the progress in terms of that particular step, that would mean they would introduce things like incentives, anything to do which would boost, the productivity in the organization, and that is what they do. At some stage, review also looks at coordination, because when you are coordinating amongst teams or different departments, and you have to maintain, obviously everyone moving, to keep everyone moving along, they have to look at coordination. And in that role, they look at not a role, that role actually transforms from being, being a reviewer's role to being a harmonizer's role. That means they will come in, help, ask for, ask questions, but they will also try and enable, the teams to be able to function well. And also, if any additional support is required, they will be all ears to listening to those suggestions to make additional resources available so that the target is well achieved on time. And when you look at controlling, controlling is like budgeting. So they must have spent a lot of money in terms of research and development on the new model of the iPhone, and that would have meant that the management has kept a tight control on budgeting for the new model. That means they must have invested. I'm just plucking a number from the air. They must have invested $1 billion, $2 billion in terms of the R&D on that model, and that model would have meant that budgeting would have meant that they had to have a clear control in terms of monitoring the activities of the individuals, the various teams involved in that project, so that if there is any deviation, or if there is any deviation from there is any key requirement in terms of making sure that the model was available for launch on a set specific date as per the timeline set, would have meant that they needed more resources, more money, or more manpower. That would have been made available, but that would have been a clear function of having a cost, kind of a model wherein if this is put in, what does the output be, or what does it alter the output? So the functions of management are essentially around, sometimes they wear a planner hat, sometimes they look at organizing, sometimes they look at coordinating, and they do continuous reviews. And the review mechanism takes the form of sometimes being a coordinator, sometimes being in a position to make blunt decisions, and sometimes in a way wherein they look at controlling the whole project so that the delivery of it is clearly maintained. Now, at this stage, I think it is good to look at what is the difference between a manager and a leader. Now, we must have covered this, I'm pretty sure, in some of the other units, but just as a quick point of reference would be to look at things like, clear differences. So managers are pretty, as you had mentioned, Philip, that managers are focused. They are, getting things done. They are focused on the present. A leader is focused on the future. So they look at transformation. They look at long-term vision in terms of long-term objectives which the organization needs to achieve. So you must have heard a term called transformational, or have you come across a term which is like transformational or transactional? Have you come across these terms?
No.
No, okay. When we look at studying various styles of leadership, we know that there are different styles which have evolved over the years. And these leadership styles, when we look at in a modern present day context, talk about two different styles. One of them is called transformational style of leadership. And here I will give you an example of Michael Dell, which is, who is the founder of Dell Computers. He's run that organization and as a business successfully for a number of years. He has become a chairman. And I think he took a bit of a backseat in the early 2012 into 2013, and the business was then let on. The business was actually it started to go down once he took a backseat. And he has shown transformational leadership is because he's come back to the company. He's taken the company off the stock market. He's taken it private. And then he's transforming the organization when it used to be a leader in PC manufacturing or custom built PCs. You remember the model wherein, I don't know if you look at going a few years back, Dell was an instrumental company wherein you could go onto its website and then configure a PC, and the PC could have been delivered in 3 to 4 days, depending on how you're paying for the shipment. Yeah. But because the PC market started to decline and Dell started to lose its position, he stepped back into the business to kind of transform it from just a PC-based company to a company which provides services like enterprise services, which is server solutions and cloud-based solutions, to also having a printing business and a services business. So that company is currently undergoing transformation. The owner and founder itself stepped into the shoes of being the transformational kind of role. And this style of leadership, wherein he's taken the bull by the horn and he's looked at that as a company, we are losing market share, we're losing revenue, we're not profitable. He's trying to reorient and reshape the business model of the company to try and make it more suitable for the current day environments wherein They are competing with the likes of Foxconn, for example, Lenovo, some of the other big players which have, HP, for example. They have other players which have lots of services which Dell did not have earlier. That's an example of transformational leadership. You look at Larry Page, and the founder of Google. They have stepped back a few years and taken a back seat to kind of develop programs and code and other bits and pieces, but they've come back on the taken the helm back of the company from, say, Eric Schmidt. The reason being, they feel that if they have to be current and they have to be viable in terms of the business, they have to transform Google's business to keep it in check with the real times. So last year, if you recall, they created a new company called Alphabet, right? They also acquired Motorola, I think about 2 years back. But they decided not to do the phone businesses because they felt that we would be directly competing. And that is where the transformation of the company is coming across, wherein the leader is basically working directly with the employees in the organization to transform its business model to suit the current modern day needs. And the other side of business is when you look at leadership styles, you look at transformation. So you have transactional and you have transformational. So transactional is when the business is very well set. There's not much change in the market, external factors, to the business from the external environment. You see leaders acting as transactional leaders. That means they will carry on with the usual set of activities, and these usual set of activities that they carry on with move the company forward because the company's business is well set. They are in a stage, if I talk about, say, the BCG matrix, the Boston Consulting Group matrix, they are in a cash cow or, a star state wherein the business is increasing. And what they need to do is they need to just continue to do what they're doing best. And that side of business, that style of leadership in the business is called transactional style. That means they get on with the job, they make sure that the work is done, and they work within the teams. Their teams work for them in terms of having the right motivation, right incentives, right plans, and they just monitor the teams to be able to deliver the task on a day in, day out basis. So key difference is why we need to understand this from a people's management concept is that sometimes within the same organization, when you work within a particular role, you have to assume different roles. You have to be a leader sometimes and you have to be a manager. So it is good to understand because these terms sometimes are used interchangeably. It is good to know the differences between them, which will help you, to understand the various stages and obviously where in what situations you have to be a leader and in what situation you have to be a manager. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, talking about very briefly, the styles of leadership. Again, this is something that is, it is a very common topic which comes across in all the units that we study, but here also, because we are looking at understanding, the factors which affect people performance. Leadership is considered as one of the factors which affects directly the performance of employees or staff within the organization. If you have a good leader and the leader listens to the staff and obviously is tuned into what's happening in and around the environment in general, you will get to see that the organization prospers and everybody's motivated, the motivation levels are high, the morale is high, and there is genuinely efficiency and productivity within the organization. So we need to briefly look at the types of leadership which which we are recognizing, which are recognized models in terms of the structure. So you have autocratic, you have democratic, you have laissez-faire, and then within that you also look at persuasive or consultative. Now, democratic leadership style has had a bit of an evolution over the years, wherein within a democratic leader, you can also see a persuasive style, and within the democratic leadership style, you can also see a consultative style. So let's look at this in a bit more detail through a quick, a few slides. What do you understand by the word autocratic, and why do you think it is called autocratic leadership style?
I've never come across that word before. Is it some sort of automatic leadership?
Well, okay. Autocratic is basically, The origin of the word autocratic basically is related to, ruler, or for example, somebody who has absolute power. So the autocratic as a word is basically meaning somebody who has absolute power. Now here, the leadership style is, why is it called autocratic? Is that the leader of the organization basically has the absolute power to make all the decisions. He or she actually makes all the decisions without consulting with employees, other managers or peers, or in the organization. So the leader itself makes the decisions, and that is why it is called an autocratic style. So when you look at where do you look at this as an organization where you see autocratic style? You see army, for example, armed forces, wherein sometimes you have to go with the gut feel of the, of the leader. So the general takes gives a command, and he feels that this is the right command, and everybody has to follow. There is no questioning, or no what do you call, no room for any maneuverability. There is no decision or discussion on that. And because the general wields, the absolute power, because of his position, the background, the experience, it is considered a style which is, an autocratic style, because here, once the leader gives the, the orders, everybody has to follow. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages of this style. You don't get to see this now working within most organizations, but you will still see remnants of the autocratic style working in places wherein we are dealing with manufacturing organizations, wherein we are dealing with, processing units, or which has a lot of automated functions. So within a factory, when you look at an engineering floor, wherein workers are working, the style of management there seems to be, autocratic, because the style of leadership there seems to be autocratic, not management, sorry. Reason, because there is a defined job which needs to be done, and you have no two ways of doing that job. You have to do it that way because the output is already defined, and that is what is required. Correct?
Yeah.
If you're in a car manufacturing plant and you're working as a shift worker, within a Nissan factory, and you work on this floor wherein you have to assemble cars, there is no two ways of assembling a car. There is a set defined process. The chassis comes in, the tires go in, then the upholstery within the car goes in. Towards the end, the engine goes in, and the exterior bonnet and other bits and pieces go in, and the car lands onto the floor. And that is what you have to follow. So there is no other way of looking at designing this until the production supervisor, or the the person in control has designed the process in some other way. You can't have welding happening while the car is being assembled, so the welding process happens first. In those kind of situations, you will see wherein there is automated work. Partly you are correct, but wherein you see functions which are very well set, you will see that this style of leadership is really present within the organization. So what you get to see, say you look at call centers, you have a certain amount of autocratic style there. When you come into the call center, the employees have to make a lot of calls, the agents have to do a lot of calls every day, but that kind of job is quite mundane. There is no room for any maneuverability, and sometimes you get to see the motivation level of the employees does fall, and you have people leaving the organization because they don't like the job. It's monotonous, it's the same job being done every day, and there is no room for any discussion or betterment in terms of improvement. The second one that we look at is basically democratic. A democratic style basically is a style wherein the leader actually encourages participation from its staff, or in the decision-making process. So sometimes you get to see leaders within, or managers within the organization. What they will do is, if they want to work, if they want the team to work on it effectively, what they will do is they call meetings in which you do a bit of brainstorm and you discuss what are the best alternatives or objectives to be able to kind of do a particular job. And this encourages participation. So you create a sense of belongingness, you create a sense of feeling wherein employees have the ability to influence the decision-making process. So an example would be within an organization, sometimes most organizations take you out, or do a annual get-together. Say, for example, a Christmas dinner. Now, there is where you will see a manager invites opinion from everyone. which is the place, which place or what do we do for this year in terms of Christmas dinner. And they will take suggestions from everyone, and in this way what they will do is they might even end up doing a small poll wherein you'll be asked to write something on it, and depending on the best or the option which most of the staff has chosen is the place that gets booked for the Christmas dinner, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is more or less a democratic style, because you're inviting everyone's opinion and allowing them to participate in the decision making process. And this then in some cases allows for more interaction and more involvement from the employees, and because of which what they see is that you will see there is more engagement with the workforce, and there's a bit of a sense of belongingness to the organization. Now, this style can be persuasive or consultative. Now, the example of a Christmas dinner is more of consultative, because you're asking for suggestions, but at the end of the day, the poll might be done, or most employees who have asked for a particular kind of an activity would then come out on top, and that would mean that it is what you call it is what is called the consultative style of making a decision. Now, the other bit will be, what you have to look at is how do we look at persuasive. Persuasive would be that in this case, what you do is, once again, Wellington is having a problem with the sound. Click on the. Now, in the case of persuasive is that sometimes what happens is you will see that there are some objectives which have to be met, or there's a set target which has to be met. And say, for example, in this case would be when you look at even the retail stores like ASDA's and Tesco's and all these stores, they all are on some sort of a monthly target. So what tends to happen is towards the end of the month, you will see the general manager within the store, or maybe the director within the store, announcing some sort of a small sales incentive scheme, which is within the purview of the manager to be able to sanction that. So that is done in order to motivate employees and persuade them to basically achieve the objective. And the persuasion can come in the form of discussion. It can come in the form of, it could come in the form of, some sort of a incentive or a bonus. It could come in the form of, orders, or it could come in the form of, having a discussion, but looking at strongly putting your viewpoints forward in place of the others, which would mean that most of the employee staff get the idea that this is something more or less decided and we need to move in this direction. So that form of leadership style, even though being democratic, kind of puts one-sided viewpoints in some cases forward, which allows for a decision making which the leader or the manager is looking at getting hold of or getting an outcome of. Have you seen that, or have you experienced that?
Yes, yeah.
Right, okay. I think sometimes what you get to see is that you will get to see this is because the managers or the leader in this case would be looking at, only giving you some part of the information which will only help you make a decision in the direction they want you to move. So when we looked at the example of, say, for example, recession, had a lot of organization had a lot of redundancies. And when you look at that as a situation, what that meant was that the organization had two choices, or the leaders or managers in that position had two choices. Either they make some employees redundant, or in some cases, some organizations said, okay, we'll cap the pay increase for our employees for a certain number of months or years, and that would help tide that situation. In some cases, the CEO or the top management also took a pay cut, but that was done because there was a bit of persuasion in that, is to say that, okay, either you lose the job, indirectly they are saying, or you continue to work, but provided not there is no increase in obviously the wages or the pay scale for the next few years. So that then tended out to be obviously a democratic decision, but slightly persuasive, is because you're forced to choose one out of the two because of the situation the company felt it in, or because of the environment, the uncertain and political environment, economic environment which the company found itself in. Now we look at the third one, which is laissez-faire. Now laissez-faire essentially, is a French word, and here basically when we look at this particular style, what we are looking at is we are looking at primarily understanding the leader does not make the decision, and he or she actually encourages the employees to take a decision or make their own mind up essentially. So here what we say is that the leader who is in the leadership position or manager on the managerial position actually does not make the decision. So this basically means, the French word essentially laissez-faire means let's do it, or let's do it together. That is the actual meaning of the word, which is what laissez-faire is. So here the manager encourages, rather than using I or we, they say let's do it together. And this kind of a leadership style that you get to see is primarily encouraged within organizations wherein you will see they are quite people oriented. That means there are lots of employees, lots of people, and these kind of organizations would have a leadership style, or the person will show a leadership style in the position wherein he has to manage a lot of workers, or manage a lot of employees and peers. And here the approach which works is the approach let's do it together kind of an approach. So leadership opportunities are shared. That means decision making opportunity is shared with the employees. And some of the advantages of this, it could be that because there is a lot of interaction, a lot of discussions, it leads to certain benefits in terms of creative ideas coming out from the organization or within the team. And in most cases, it has been shown that this particular leadership style actually promotes, or people working with this kind of a leadership style actually show the highest level of motivation towards the organization. Disadvantages are that sometimes you will see the decision-making process does not work. Decision takes too long a time. They take too long to happen because the leader leaves the decision to the staff or to the employees in the organization, and it leads to kind of indecisiveness. That means decisions cannot be reached or are not reached in time in terms of this particular style. So one of the key things that we look at when we look at this in detail is that when we look at managing people's expectation and performance within the organization, one of the key things which affects how people work and to what extent they work, whether they work positively or negatively, whether they contribute positively or negatively, is leadership styles. And we get to see this on a daily basis, whether it's a small business, large business, organization, big and small. We get to see this quite often. And what we need to be able to do is identify quite quickly that which style is working or which style does not work, and then adapt ourselves to be able to work with the team or the staff that we have to move things forward. So which leadership style is best? It's difficult to say, but sometimes you have to use a combination of all. Sometimes you have to use one over the other because it depends on the function, it depends on the type of members you have in the team, and sometimes you also see that there is a lack of coordination or lack of excitement, enthusiasm in terms of working together in teams, and that would mean that you have to use maybe a laissez-faire style. Let's say, okay, let's do it together, rather than a few set of employees doing it, or a few set of people assuming responsibility and doing it. So sometimes you will get to see that decision making becomes more participative, and it uses a combination of these styles to alleviate pressures on the job, or alleviate, I would say, or do away with the pressures which gets created because of using one particular absolute style in the organization. Now, one of the other things that we'll look at very briefly would be that sometimes you will see that when we understood leadership, now we need to understand what influences leadership. So what kind of styles, we know what kind of styles are there, and when we see people in positions of leadership showing or exhibiting, but we need to understand how they are also influenced, what keeps them motivated, what are the basic theories or frameworks they follow to be able to look at having that positive impact on people within the teams, or within people and the teams that they work with. So here is what we'll briefly understand, theories of management. Now there are various theories of management, and in these theories of management we will also understand theories of motivation, and we will look at them because motivation is the second most important factor which influences people performance within the organization. It is imperative for us to understand the theories of management, and they are briefly listed as scientific management theory, which was proposed by one of these physiologists or psychologists, essentially Taylor. There is a management principle theory which was proposed by Henry Fayol. You have bureaucracy, which is Max Weber, and then you have human relations, and you have a contingency school of thought. Now, what is applicable today? I've got a few slides which are relevant from a understanding and point of view of what are these various management styles. But the one which currently now works in the modern day context is the contingency school of thought, and this was proposed by Lupton, which argues that there is no best management approach to resolving problems. Right? I'm not going to get into the theories, is because it's just literally reading and understanding the various evolution of management theories over a point in time. But the ones which currently work, the whole idea of the evolution of this concept was that there is not one particular management style which fits all situations. Just like when one leadership style does not fit all situations, similarly one management style or management theory does not fit all situations. So the contingency theory which came out, or Lupton proposed, was that he clearly said that because the scientific approach in some cases does not work, the rational approach in some cases does not work, what we have to look at is a contingency form of management, which basically means that you have to adapt depending on the situation that you are in. And this style of management also considered that even if you have one particular style, you are influenced by internal and external factors which have to be taken into consideration. That means sometimes your decision-making process as a manager is influenced by the external environment. That means what are the competitors doing, right? You also sometimes get influenced by internal factors within the organization. That means if you promote this particular employee, will it have a demotivation or a repercussion as regards to the department morale, or the other employee who are also performing well, but we are promoting somebody because of seniority and experience. So sometimes you have to look at this approach wherein you have to resolve problems, and there is not one management theory or which kind of fits all situation. And that is where you have to find, depending on the situation and the problem that you face or the issues that you face in the organization, you have to flexibly kind of adapt the approaches as you move along, and that is where the contingency school of thought comes in. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. One of the examples that I would probably give out is, now when we understand leadership, we understand management, what we also need to look at is what are the various styles of leadership and what kind of impact they have. Now, if I'm an autocratic leader, that means I don't listen to anybody, I only do what I want to do, and I make the decisions, then you can obviously see that the motivation level with other employees will go down, because they'll say, okay, even irrespective of the fact that I say something, it does not matter, he's going to do his own thing, so there's no point in even kind of bringing this up for discussion. So sometimes you will see that these factors which I've listed out on the slide, things like motivation, creativity, flexibility, like I can only work 9 to 5 because I know that my manager is quite automatic. He makes me work quite hard, so I'm not flexible. I'm not willing to give me extra time because I kind of have had it enough between 9 to 5 when I work with him. So these are other small parameters which essentially affect your performance if you do not like the style of leadership within the organization. And it can affect your productivity, your commitment to the organization, your trust and respect. And at some stage, when you say, he's lost my credibility because I don't find him, I don't find that person to be credible enough because he says something, he does something else. So sometimes you will see these situations wherein these factors are factors which kind of are related to the leadership style, and they have a direct impact on your motivation or your performance within the company. Okay?
Okay.
Now, what are the other things that we look at in terms of, what most organizations in modern day life, times are promoting? In terms of, it is not necessary for you to come to office, for you to perform or for you to, work. Some companies, when you look at Facebook, Google, the modern day companies today, they are saying you can work from home. So they have created something called flexible working practices, which allows workers to work from home. And this, because they are more in tune with, working from the, kind of confines of where they are comfortable, has some advantages and has some disadvantages. So the benefits of having flexible working is something which a lot of organizations are now promoting. Things like, when I say flexible working would be part-time, flexible working could be, to do with the fact that you have a rota system. That means you work in shifts or something like that. And those are all aspects of, flexible working. So that means you don't need to work 9 to 5, which was considered to be a working hour, working hours. You could work from 10 to 6, or you could work from 12 to 5, as long as the work gets done. So managers today are working to adapt flexible working practices within their kind of work style, is because they are more concerned about getting the work done rather than how long does it take to get it done, or where are you, how and where you get it done is less important. So as long as the work is given to me and I can do it from home, or the output is available to the manager, he or she is absolutely fine. So working, flexible working actually tends to appeal people who want to get more autonomy. That means they want more freedom. They want more, diverse variety of work that they can do. And in some cases, you will see that they are more organized and focused, because, and even self-motivated, is because they know how to get the work done. So you look at an example of consultants, if you look at a lot of organizations in the London area actually employ people, on a contractual basis. And the reason why they employ people on a contractual basis to get work done, or on a project basis to get the work done, is they feel that they can get people in who are, more experienced and more focused, or they are self-motivated and they know exactly how the job is to be done, rather than have somebody within the organization do it, right? A typical example that I would give out is that a lot of organizations, sometimes they have inspections. So what they tend to do is, or when you have audits, they tend to get auditors in, and they tend to get contractual organizations in who have the experience of getting this done, and they don't mind paying an X amount of fees for it, because that kind of helps them save the whole hassle of going through the process of inventing, creating, and meeting the criteria. Because if they hire a consultant, they know exactly what is required. They come in, they do the work, get the inspection done, and they're on with it. So in some cases, you will see that these kind of people who are quite autonomous in terms of they are quite disciplined, they are self-motivated, you will see that they like the idea of flexible working. And flexible working can have different approaches, as I mentioned to you. It could be, for example, part-time work. It could be work in shifts. It could be nighttime work, or having 0 work hours, for example, which is a term that we are using nowadays. It could be they work 3 days, take some days off, rather than do 5 days 9 to 5. They might just work 3 days, 12 hours each, and still end up doing the same number of hours, but they take the 2 other days off. Those kind of things. 0 contract hours, as we asked, as I mentioned to you. So these are all areas wherein organizations are currently adapting these things into their working policies, is because they feel people's performance and motivation and productivity goes up if you incorporate flexible working practices within the organization. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are some advantages and some disadvantages. So disadvantages would be that leads to there is stresses on time management. There are not many employees which are very good at being self-motivated, and in those cases, what you will see is that they become stressed because they feel that certain days off, certain days on, it's a bit of more pressure on them to be for them to be able to deliver work and things like that. Some people have financial pressures. They want a regular 9 to 5 job, and they want a routine job rather than a flexible or a contractual job. So it puts financial pressures. Sometimes you will see that people become isolated if they don't come to a workplace and follow the ethics and adapt the culture, and basically look at the things the organization wants them to do. They kind of feel isolated that, okay, though I work in London, I only come to the office once a week. And because I can only come to the office once a week, sometimes I don't get to meet employees, so I don't really care. I don't meet my colleagues, I don't really care. So when you look at organizations wherein you have lots of people working within the team, and the team is then responsible for delivery of a particular, say, in software organizations, look at like Facebook, there are lots of engineers working in different geographies in the world. You have some in UK, some in Ireland, some in the US, some in India, some based in Switzerland, in the data centers and things like that. But they, as a team, all work together to deliver an output. So sometimes they become isolated because they're working within their own silos, and they kind of feel that they get left out. They don't get to see the whole, the product, for example, when it is launched. It could also be, so some of these are disadvantages, as you can see, and they're not difficult to correlate. Regular routine. Sometimes you become a freelancer, and you kind of say that I want to be a more of a permanent employee, but I'm kind of working in a freelancing mode. And it's sometimes difficult, which people now come across a lot of it, is that they say it's very difficult to switch off from the work, because you don't know, in this case, if you work on a flexible working policy, you don't know when your work actually starts and when it actually stops. And I end up doing more work, and because of which I cannot switch off during the course of the day, because they don't know when a call will come, or when when some sort of a work will come into in the email, and they will have to get on with it. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, in general, have you seen that the emails on your phone has made it very difficult for you to switch off from work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because what tends to happen is you have emails coming in every now and then, and sometimes if you don't follow a religious routine saying that, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone after 8, or before 9 in the morning, then you don't know when actually your work is actually switching off or on. Even if you're texting, replying briefly, whatever it is, you're still working, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you look at 20 years back, when there was no mobile phone, things like that, only contact was available was when you went into the office, or when you called into your boss to say that I'm sick or whatever it is. That was the only way they could get hold of you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Now, before I go in, I think one of the last bits that I need to look at discussing, there are two things that we'll need to look at discussing, is one is key aspect of motivation. How do you motivate employees to consistently deliver across the year? What impacts their performance, and what takes what basically brings them to work every day and then keeps them motivated, is something that we need to study through motivational theories. Now, there are various theories which have been proposed over the years, but they are all being clubbed into 3 different types. Right. Again, very basic. You've heard of Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs. Have you heard of that?
No.
No. Okay. So there's a handout that I need to give you on this. Basically, Maslow, as a psychologist, he proposed that the basic needs have to be met first before before you have the employee actually working for you for higher objectives or higher motives. So his theory is quite relevant and quite basic to the fact that he did a experiment, and because of which this is quite well known that when they look at motivating employees, he grouped the needs of the employees or needs of a person into 5 different categories. And this were put together into some sort of a pyramid. And what he said was that the basic needs have to be met first for them to then move on to the next need and the next level, and then from then onwards, so there's a pyramid which gets formed. So the first needs are physiological. After that, you have safety and security. You have, obviously love and social needs. You have esteem needs, and at some stage you have self-actualization, where you want to talk about, I have lots of experience. You want to brag about yourself, and you're at a stage wherein you're willing to share your knowledge, and obviously, looking at sharing things with the world. So in a sense that when he did this in the 1940s, basically he talked about the psychology of comparing a tiered structure of human need, and that is what he created, this pyramid of hierarchical needs. And what he said is, once you satisfy the physiological needs, then this individual moves to meeting the safety and security needs. Like you need safety in terms of a job, you need security in terms of financial security, things like that. There are other theories which came about, and those other theories which came about was, theory X and Y was basically, proposed, wherein it also identified these needs, what Maslow, kind of proposed, but grouped it into 2, X and Y. And it said the X are a set of assumptions in terms of how to manage individual motivations at a lower level, and then the Y are the set of assumptions that you want to get at a higher level. So if you understand that if you're a student, you want to complete your education, and then at some stage you want to buy a car, buy a house, and get on a career or job. So when you look at the lower level needs are physiological, because when you are in a uni or in a student life, all you're looking at is studying, completing your education, and going past it. There are no other goals. You want some security at some stage to get into a job, and that is where you're looking at doing a degree. But beyond that, what you then look at is, once you achieve that, you look at starting to understand what are the higher level needs that I need. And this was put together by an American social physiologist called Douglas McGregor, and he classified Maslow's needs into X and Y. That means 2 parameters, which is basically looking at the basic set of needs and requirements met first, and then the higher set of requirements, which were clubbed into something called Y. So, and the third one that we will look at is something called the Alderfer's ERG theory, and he classified the same needs into 3 levels. He said there are basic things which people need, like food, shelter, water, for existence. And once they have that, they then need other set of parameters, which basically, look at things like, how do I get known in society? How do I look at, a bit of, become a bit of social, how do I look at basic things like, being known in the society, get a better job. You're looking at betterment essentially. And then you have growth needs. That means you're looking at growing from where you have been for a number of years. You want to grow. If I have this money, how can I get more? If I'm at the manager's level, supervisor level, how do I become a manager? And then you start to identify the gap areas, and that drives you towards, having growth, or looking at needs which basically look at growth. So these 3 different motivational theories can be put into, a matrix, wherein you define something called the lower level needs, and then you define the higher level needs. And the 3 approaches which we put forward, Maslow's approach was quite detailed, but over a point in time, they were classified into 3 levels of existence, relatedness, and growth, and then by another person or a physiologist, and he defined that when you look at modern organizations, the motivation level is basically need for affiliation, need for power, and need for achievement. So there are people who will always look at affiliating. That means they want to kind of coordinate or work with similar like-minded people. Once they have achieved that experience, what they want to then do is use that experience to gain, power. That means they want to go into a powerful position. Or when you work as colleagues, at some stage when your performance differentiates from the others, you get promoted. And because you get promoted, you are in a managerial position. So that means you have the authority or the power. And at that stage, you start to work your way up into the organization because you have certain needs which are being driven by the need for achievement. That means you want to look at a higher position, you want to become a general manager, you want more salary and things like that. And that is where he clubbed it as he clubbed these 5 basic type of needs into 3 in terms of categories. And then these are the reason why we look at these theories. What is the main reason why we look at these theories? The main reason why we look at these motivational theories is that motivation is one of the key factors which essentially influences employee performance or people's performance within an organization. So leaders and managers need to understand these theories to be able to put them into practice as and when required, depending on the situation or depending on the organization that you work in. And you should be able to relate to people's basic needs and needs at the higher level and then needs at the highest level, so that you can then accordingly provide resources and things available, make things available to these your employees and resources to get the desired output from them. Is that okay?
Yeah.
There's a bit to get on with on this, but the basic crux is that we need to understand why and what are the factors which impact employee performance. So we've looked at leadership, we've looked at management style, we've looked at flexible working practices, why flexible working is coming in most organizations, and how does it influence people's motivation and in terms of productivity. And then we look at the whole concept of motivational theories to understand the needs of the individuals first. You are called an effective manager or you are an effective leader if you understand what the needs and wants or requirements of your people are or of your staff are. So if I know my staff quite well in terms of where they come from, what are the basic requirements, why they are doing the job, then I am able to control some of these factors to be able to get work done and put necessary, say, for example, necessary emoluments, benefits in place for my staff to be able to get the best out of them. Okay? That's the crux. Now, what I'm going to do is obviously stop here, and I'm going to send a copy of this presentation in the email with a bit of a handout. And that handout will be in it'll have 3 parts to it. So it'll have some leadership theories for you to understand and read. It'll have some leadership styles. The third part of that will be motivation theories. So what we need to be able to do is applicability of the leadership styles, the motivation theories, and how it impacts the people's performance or staff performance within an organization is what we need to understand. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Any questions, queries? As always, email / phone. I don't get many, but what I would do is I would definitely like some feedback in terms of whether the topics that we are discussing are discussed in detail. Do you find them to be relevant? Do you find them to be adequate in terms of the discussion? Because what I'm going to do now going forward is we're going to discuss, because these basic frameworks that we're discussing, are going to be repeated again in some of the other units. And the idea would be to discuss them through case studies. So I might bring in a case study, send that across to you on the email a day before the class happens, and then ask you to go through it. And then what we will do is we will use the implementation of these case studies, of these theories and framework to discuss the case study.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to look at one case study in particular, which is the enterprise cars, or which is a very popular case study from Times 100. And we look at how enterprise cars, which is more or less a business wherein there's a lot of contractual staff working within the company. They use the leadership style, the management theories, the management styles, and how do the employee and the staff motivated within an organization which has more than 80% staff which works on contracts and they are not permanent. Okay?
Okay.
Good stuff. Thanks a lot for joining the session today, Philip. Wellington, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I'm getting you.
No,
I'll call you tomorrow.
That's absolutely fine. No problem. I'll speak to you tomorrow. No worries.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm going to send you a copy of this presentation and obviously put it on Moodle as well. But apart from that, the handout, which is what I would expect you to go through in a bit more detail, about 7 to 10 pages. But it will be, giving you some more details of what we've discussed during the presentation.
Okay.
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 Thanks a lot, guys, for joining in, and have a good evening. And I'll speak to you tomorrow, hopefully next week.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay.